Your story is unique. Your story is important. But how do you see it? Are you owning your past? Or are you still stuck being the victim of it? The truth is, the way you see your story shapes the chapters still to come. In this episode, I'll share lessons from Jeff Hardy, who said that you've got to give your story away to keep it, and from Darius Boyd, who showed the power of taking ownership. Together they highlight one simple truth. When you own your story, you get to write the next chapters on your own terms, with the best possible outcomes. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport as I see it is to see your vision become a reality, find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Humans have been sharing stories for millennia. We've been passing them down for generation to generation, sharing our history, the important parts of our family, of our culture, of our nations. And you have your own story. Everyone's story is unique and everyone's story is valuable. And this week I've been listening to a number of different people talk about why those stories are important. I went to a book launch on Thursday night. Matt Elliott, you would remember him. He was the Canberra Raiders coach, the Penrith Panthers coach. He also played at the Dragons many, many moons ago. And he's written this book, and he's written a couple of books, and this one was co-authored with someone else, and it's about the second half of your life. I might talk about that in another episode. But he had his best mate from his playing days, Jeff Hardy, there to talk a little bit about, rather than a welcome to country, it was just talking about the importance of the land they were on and the importance of story. And he told the story of where we were, which was Homebush Bay, and Cathy Freeman winning gold there at the main stadium back in 2000. And he talked about meeting Michael Johnson, who also ran that night. And he won the 200, 400 metres double. It was, a pretty special experience of his own. But he said Michael Johnson actually had said how all of the 400 metre runners broke what they usually would do in their warm-up and went out and watched Cathy's race because of the energy of the crowd and just what an enormous occasion it was. So again, that story that he told, I got goosebumps listening to it then, and I got goosebumps saying it again then. I was there that night. Such an incredible experience. That whole Sydney 2000 Olympics was such an incredible experience. But again, this is why stories are important, is because it connects us emotionally. And one of the things that he said was he'd learnt from an elder was that you've got to give away your story to keep it. So what does that mean? Well, your story, to keep it, to make it who you are, you have to give it away. You have to share it. People need to know your story. And that doesn't mean you have to write a book. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily have a stage to share it. But it's by how you live and being true to your story. Because like I said, everyone has a story. Everyone has a unique story, a powerful story, a valuable story. And the more you can find out what your story is and find that golden thread that runs through it and share it, then that's how you'll keep it. That's how you'll own it. And that owning the story is an important part, not just because of that golden thread and for purpose and all the things you've heard me talk about before, but something that I heard Darius Boyd say this week, the former, he played for the Broncos, the Dragons, Newcastle. He represented Queensland, he represented Australia, an incredible career, but he also had his fair share of mental health challenges. His story, his upbringing, full of massive, massive challenges. And he talked about how, with his story, he was a victim of his story. He didn't own his story. For many, many years, he was the victim in his story, And he had kept himself in that place, and that had contributed a lot to some of the mental health struggles he had, some of the behaviour at different times where the media portrayed him in a certain light. And again, my preconceived ideas of who he was based on that. Now, he did say he had to learn a lot about the media and what they need, because there was a famous moment where there was a press conference, people had driven down to Wollongong when he was at the Dragons, and he'd given really short one-word answers, and the media weren't too happy. And yeah, that would have been one of those moments. Yes, it's difficult in that spotlight, but what he didn't know then was the responsibility as a professional footballer. But it was mainly because he was in that state of being the victim of his story. But instead, he owned that story. He went back and unpacked. He said he ended up in a I don't know if it was a rehab centre, but he ended up in a place where he needed to work on his mental health. And part of that was owning his story, the never knowing who his dad was. Growing up without a dad, he had male figures, his uncle and maybe grandfather, I think he said, but he said then also they left him. Like they died suddenly. He'd had other people in his life that had come and gone, and so he had this really tough story. Like, I can't even imagine what he's been through, having grown up in a family where there was much more connection. Now, that doesn't mean that there were different elements to my story that I need to own, but I can't imagine what his was like. But that's not to say anything about comparison, but it's more to say, well, of course, you can understand why he behaved the way he behaved at different times if he'd been through those really challenging times and he hadn't had anyone to help him come out the other side. Now, he did say he was blessed to have someone like Wayne Bennett that he played for, who has got a long record of helping young men through their different challenges and being that father figure for them. But it wasn't until he went and got professional help that he was able to own his story. And now, by owning his story, he had a much more enjoyable end to his career in terms of how he was able to interact with people, not just on the football field, but right across his life. And now he's paying that forward by helping other people who may be experiencing some of the challenges that he's been through. And as I've said on previous episodes, this doesn't mean that you have to have this like huge thing that goes with it. You don't have to have a business or become a coach or write a book or any of these things, but you can bring it into every part of your life. But you can't do that until you know your story, until you own your story. And it does take some work on your part. It does require you to sit with that and have some self-awareness, to develop emotional intelligence, and to look back at your journey and see what are the important parts. Where have you added value in your story of your life? Where is the uniqueness? Who are you? What is the part of you that is important to you and important to other people in your life? And how will that contribute to where you're heading in the future? How will that help you to rewrite how you see your past? And how will that help you to write a whole new chapter, many chapters, through the lens of the best possible way that you can live your life going forward? So do not dismiss your own story. Your own story is so important, and people need to hear it. And part of you already knows, because there are different times where people ask you questions where you'll open up and you'll share different things going on in your world. It is important. And if you see the fine print on my profile, you'll see that some of the work that I do is around personal brand. Not personal brand of you needing to go and do a whole lot of marketing, but your personal brand as in, where is your value? Who are you? And how are you going to set yourself up to be your absolute best? You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.